Hello, everyone. We're just going to give another minute or so for folks to join up with our webinar today. Appreciate everyone for jumping on, and I'll be coming in and talking about this in just a minute. Just want to give a couple, minute or so for folks to join. So bear with us for just another minute. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started today with our approval webinar, take two, I call it. So just a couple things before we get started. There is a space for asking questions in the GoToWebinar panel that you have. If you have any questions during the process or during this webinar, go ahead and pop them into the questions box. We have Scott Restivo on the call as well to answer questions. I think I forgot to introduce myself. I'm James Restivo with Croquet Software. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Ask your questions if you need to. I'll be talking about other upcoming webinars towards the end of the call as well. We have a great webinar series coming up in the month of April. We're talking about the out-of-the-box applications we have and a few other things going on. But first, we'll start with this approval workshop. So the reason we're doing another kind of take two of the approval process, from the last one, we were talking about the advanced approval app, which is a good tool. It works very well for what it does, but it has a couple limitations. And those limitations are that it is only available for Office 365 customers. So that's one big thing. So if you're on-prem, you don't have access to it. So we want to make sure the on-prem customers we have are aware of how they can build these approval processes. The other reason, even if you are going to be using the Advanced Approvals app in Office 365, there are some limitations in the things you can do to extend it. You're not going to be able to do the lazy approval via email. There's other things, other processes, other actions, other workflows that you want to run. It conflicts with our existing workflow tool. So it does have some pretty significant limitations. So I do want to point that out and make sure everyone understands why we're doing this again. So what we're going to talk about today is how you can build out an approval process using custom actions and NITRO workflows. The real heart of it is going to be a list in the site called approval definition, and there's going to be a submit new approval custom action I'll talk about quite a bit. Those are really kind of the hearts of the process. And I'll talk about how those are set up, why they're set up the way they are, and that'll help you give you the information you need to modify it to your own needs. And that's really the key, is we want to make sure you have the ability to understand what it's doing, what it's all about, so you can go in and make your own modifications to it to make it run the way you want. So we'll go ahead and get started with this. First thing I want to do is, before I start sharing my screen, is that I want to talk about the anatomy of a workflow, or approval workflow, excuse me. So there's really, at the heart of it, three core things that you're going to need. You're going to need a request list, which is going to be the form that people are submitting, whatever it is. So it's going to be a SharePoint list in your site. There's going to be approvers. Now, how those approvers are defined can depend on how complex the approval process is. And then there's going to be notifications throughout to notify approvers, notify requesters of the approval decision, things like that.
James, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I was going to share my screen in just a moment here. I just want to talk about those, those things.
There was somebody asking a question about that. Okay, sorry.
All right, no problem. So one of the things, you can build out approval processes in a fairly straightforward manner. Of course, you can just have a simple action that goes and notifies an approver that they have a task, they go and approve it, and it updates the item. Bada bing, you're done. It could be really simple like that, or it could be quite variable. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now. Let's see if I get that going. Make sure everyone can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So we got the screen share going. And what I wanted to start with here is this approval definition list that we're going to be keying off of for these approvals. This is where you define what the approval process is for different types of requests. So you can see what we've built here is a couple different ways to manage this process. So you have in this case, it's going to be based on department and it's going to be based on location. So in this example, we have a company with a distributed workforce in a few different cities throughout North America. And there's different approval processes based on not only where they're located, but what department they're a part of. So we're building up this kind of approval definition list to attend to those situations. So you have a finance, you have your finance department that in one or actually in 3 offices it's going to be exactly the same, but in 2 other offices they have a slightly different process. And another thing you'll notice here is that I'm missing a level 2 approver here. I'm going to point that out why I did that, and that's part of the reason we think using custom actions and workflows is going to be beneficial or a better way to do it because of that, because you can have different levels of approval for different criteria that are being met. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you build out approval processes for a type of form. So you add in these new levels easily. Let's say you want to add it in a level 3 for one of these, we could do that, and I'll kind of walk through how we do that. So we can add a column. We're going to do a person column. We're just going to add a L3 approver, and go ahead and save. Yeah, see that gets added. We can add in a person. Let's say we want to add it to this approval definition, and we'll add admin account. Okay. Great. So now you can see we have, even within the same form that's being submitted, you can have an approval process that has only 1 level, or you can have an approval process that has up to 3 levels or more. And really there's no limitation on how many levels you can put in here, on how far you can build this out. So again, the key features are this approval definition list, and we're keying off of what this device request form. So this device request form, just to pull it up, is going to have some of those key elements that we're talking about, the department, which can be a lookup field, and then we can have, let's do the sales. And then you can have location, which can be a choice field. So you can even have different types of fields that you're referencing and keying off of for that approval process. So you go ahead and fill out your information, and we already got a couple already filled out here, so I'll just key off of those. You can see it's got the pending approval. And then, so the user comes in, they submit their list, and one thing we're going to refer back to in a couple ways here, I just want to bring it up to your attention right now, is this Visio diagram. So you should be seeing a Visio diagram on your screen now that talks about it goes through the process essentially and how we set up these approval processes. This will be available to you after the webinar, so I'm going to refer back to it a couple of times just to help visualize where we are in the process and help visualize what we're doing. So I will bring that up a few more times. Okay, so we got the approver definitions that you can put into place and play around with those. The key thing though, so when we go and submit this, there's a submit for approval custom action that we have on our list. So this is the other key element, other than defining the criteria for what those approval processes are going to be. We want to do a submit for approval custom action, and there's quite a bit going on in here. So I'll go through it in some detail, and certainly, Scott, if there's any pertinent questions that I need to address as we go through this, I'm happy to do that. So the first action you'll see on here is a query list action. So this query list, if you're not familiar with it, is going to allow you to go and get items from another list in SharePoint based on the criteria you've defined in the action itself. So in this case, we're going to be referencing that approval definition list, and we're going to be pulling back some information. And we want to pull back we want to match the criteria from the request that was submitted to the approval definition list. So over here on the left-hand side, what you have are the fields in the approval definition list. So the department, is one of those fields, and we want that to equal the department in the form itself. Now you notice we have these placeholders and a few different, some interesting syntax going on here, and I just want to explain that a little bit to let you know what it's doing. So this first part, if you're referencing a lookup column and you want to use a placeholder for a lookup column anywhere in the system, anywhere in NITRO, if you can use this in other conditions as well, not just for the approval process, you have this lookup ID reference. So that's going to tell the system that we're going to be referencing a lookup column. And then this function here is pulling the ID of that department field specifically, and these percent placeholders are going to be your, it's an indication that it is a placeholder. Now you could directly put a value here if you want. You just do where department equals sales, only run the process for that. If you want to do department equals finance, that kind of thing. You can just directly put that word finance right in this field if you wanted to. But using this gives you a way to dynamically control what is being referenced and how we pull that information. And you'll see too, we do the similar thing here with the location field, but because it's a choice field and not a lookup field, we don't need the lookup ID function. We don't need the lookup ID information at the front. We can just directly do a %% column reference in the middle, %%, and so that's going to dynamically create that variable, that placeholder for location. And then so it goes, and that's all the query list is really doing. It's just saying, go look at this approval definition list and pull back all the definitions that match this, or the one definition really that matches this department and matches this location. Now we're going to reference that later in some of these other functions. And one other thing I want to point out, we'll come back to this in just a minute too, is the approver is this variable, approver empty variable. And what we're doing here is we're just storing an empty, a blank value, a null value, and you'll see why that's important in just a little bit. So there's another piece of it that we want to put in there. So then you notice too, these actions are a little bit backwards, and that's actually by design. So you see you got the approve action right here at the top, but then you have the level 2 approver, but then you have level 1 down here. That's actually by design and just kind of the quirk of the way custom actions runs. It's easier to skip these actions and go down to the real relevant action. And then later on in the process, we're going to be referencing this custom action again and again in the approval process. It's going to go, come back in here, get the approver definition information from the query list, and then it'll hit this as submit for level 2, and it won't even consider these other options because that process will be done. And same, so it's kind of like, go through all these things and get to the real action that we want to take. And then if we want to add a level 3 approver in here, we could easily do that as well. So you can kind of see visually what we're doing with the Visio diagram over here is kind of similar. So user submits their request. We got the submit for approval custom action. It goes and queries that approver definition list, that query list action we were just looking at, creates the approver task, and so that's where that's that submit action. Let me go back to here. So that's the submit for a level 2 or submit for level 1 add list item, right? So that's the add list item action right there. So it creates the approver task. Then we have a NITRO workflow, which is really just a simple send mail workflow to notify the approver that a task was created. Let me blow this up a little more, just to make sure everyone can see it. And then the approver comes in, they make their decision. Now we have a few other elements, and we have the whole article on how to set this up, and that talks about using permissions for for the custom actions, this approve custom action and the deny custom action. That's important, but I think we'll skip over those things for now because they don't impact the actual workflow itself. They just inform who can update the action and who can't. Important to put in place, but we'll talk about that maybe outside this webinar. So then the decision being no makes it pretty simple, straightforward. There's a deny action that then goes and it'll check that submit for approval, custom action approval again. It updates the request with the approval decision. That's that approve action. So we go back to our custom action. That's the approve action here, happening here. And then there's a workflow to notify the user of whether it's approved or denied. But then if it gets approved, we want to check to see if there's a level 2. So this is where we come into, the approve a custom action. This approved custom action is really just invoking, all it's really doing is invoking the submit for approval workflow, or the submit for approval custom action. That's all it's really doing, because it's going to go and check, it's going to query that approver definition list and check to see, are there any other approval levels? And if there are, the approver task for level 2. So that's the, come back here, that's the submit for level 2 action. And then if it doesn't, of course, it's going to just mark it as approved, and it'll go through and just send the notification. Now you can see here, it's going to say yes, create the approver tasks, go through the whole thing again. And again, you can see yes or no. And then it goes through it again, and so on. So you can actually build it out to level 3, level 4, level 5, however many levels you want. Now let me go back and talk about adding another level here. So we have our level 2, we have our level 1. We want to come in here and add a new level 3. So we've configured these as per the article we have out on our .help site. You can see it's on, if you want to reference it yourself, it's article 458, and it's actually this article here for configuring the actions, which is 459. So this talks about how you set up those actions. So once you get those all set up, we can add in another level, and it'll just kind of, I'll walk you through how we do that. Let's move back over here. Okay, so the next one is going to be an add list item. And one thing we're going to do is we're actually going to refer back to that 459 article, make sure we set it up the way it needs to be set up. So submit for a level 3 approver. Sorry. For level 3 approval. So when we add a new level, we just give it a name here. We're going to create an item in the approver tasks list again, which is what we're doing here, creating approval tasks. Then we got to put in some conditions. So the conditions kind of get interesting. There's this parse field value, and I'll talk about that when we get this set up. So I add a condition. Do approval level is going to be equal to level 2 at this point, because we're coming to level 3. So approval level equals level 2. So we're going to add our condition. Make sure you set up right. It's all okay. And do advanced condition. So this advanced condition is really interesting, because this gives it the option to compare values outside of this, outside of either list that we're working with. So in this case, we're using this parse field value function to get information. And this is actually where that variable is going to come into play. So let me pull this up. Let me pull this into a Word doc to talk about it. I'm sorry, not Word doc, a Notepad. All right, so what we're doing here, just to break it down, is we're using an advanced condition in the NITRO tool, and it's going to equal or not equal this. In this case, I think it's going to not equal. And the reason why I do not equal is because what we're doing is we're comparing this approver empty variable, which remember we created as a blank variable. So it's saying if this is empty, and it's comparing it against the next level approval. So this is actually going to be approval level 3 when we go and add this back into our conditions. So going back to our approval definition list here, it was basically saying is that if this is blank, let's say it's gone through this one. If this is blank, then the approval process is over. We're done. It doesn't need another level. So that's essentially what this is doing. It's saying, okay, let's go and check to see if this approval level 3 is blank. If it is, then we don't need to do this because we don't need to create another level. So that's why we do not equals here. So we're going to do a advanced condition not equal to, and we'll go and pull in our thing here. So if it's not equal to that being empty, then it will go and create the, it'll go refer back to that query list, and it'll create the item. So we'll go and you do our mappings as per the documentation we have over here. Yeah, I'll do mappings. So you do like a.
James, not to interrupt, but one person asking if this is serial or parallel approval.
This case, we're doing serial approval.
Okay,
yeah, this is the use case for serial approval. So I won't belabor this too much as far because you know, it's pretty straightforward. Just go and add this stuff. You can go refer to the article. You can create these mappings however you need to. The key one, of course, is going to be the assigned to. So we want that assigned to be coming from the query list. So we're going to pull our query list into the custom action, copy paste, and we're going to change that to level 3. And hit OK. So then we can add other things as well, but I'll just leave it there for now because some of this other stuff is just about approval level is important, but yeah, we want in the connection and all that. But I just want to really highlight how you can make it for the next level. So we can leave it there, and then so then we have to move that up. So we'll just move that up to just below the approve. And then we just add our update form approval status, which if we take this one for an example, it's just looking at level 1, and then it's you know, if the next level is blank, it's going to it's you know, if the next level is blank, it's not going to run this action to update the form to to level 3, because level 3 is not going to be needed. So again, we're using that parse field value a couple times, and again, it's just about comparing that empty value to the value in the approver definition list to see if the action should continue or not. Okay. Okay, and then after we add that, when we add our update list item action to complete the process, we need to come back in here. Again, we're using that advanced condition, and we just need to add a new condition here to say, actually, it's going to be a new group. Delete that. Add group approval level equal level 2. We're going to go ahead and delete this one. Add a condition. We're going to use that advanced condition. You can see this one is saying level 2, so we're going to go ahead and copy that. Easy enough, just copy and paste that down. I'll do level 3. Let me add a condition. Level equals level 3. So this is telling the system, this is telling the tool, go and check, is the approval level at level 1? Yes or no? If it is, then skip this process. Is at level 2? If it is, go ahead and skip this process, which is again, the approve action. And then if it's at level 3, we know that's the highest level that could possibly be there, and it's going to go ahead and approve it. You can see it's setting the value to be approved and the approval date to be today. So you can see it's pretty straightforward. I just added a new level there pretty quickly. I just a few other task mappings I would need to add, but you can add another level pretty quickly. You can add another, you know, level 4, level 5, whatever you need to. But then the other real benefit is that you're coming in here to the approver definition and saying, okay, well, I want to change who the approver is. It's just, you don't have to go into any coding or any kind of hard, you know, or search through all like if you're using Power Automate, you search through all the different levels or different steps to figure out where you are. You just come in here and say, you know what, we don't need a level 3 approver anymore. Or you know what, the level 2 approver changed to Scott instead of Pavan. Simple as that. Now, without doing anything else, after having all the other stuff set up, without doing anything else, we've changed our approval process. So it's just that simple. So once you get everything configured, it's really straightforward to go in here and make this different. Now, if there's any other questions out there, I'd love to field them. Scott, any questions for us that we can dig into?
No, not at this point, but I think the idea of serial versus parallel might be good to show what parallel can do and versus serial.
Yeah, parallel. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you because I prepared this one for the serial approval and I didn't get a chance to dig into the parallel process. So we can, whoever has that question, we can definitely dig back into that and get back to you on that piece of it.
Well, serial can have multiple levels, but it's one by one by one. Level 1, level 2, level 3.
Right.
Parallel is going to multiple people at once, say everybody on level 1, 3 people or whatever. And then deciding if one person approves it, it's approved at that level, or whether all three or 2 out of the 3 or something like that, some level like that with parallel.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a little
in
bit
the
more
simple use
complicated.
case, yeah, I mean, in a real simple use case here, we could just add, I think we need to change the field to be, we just need to change this field to be multi-select, but you can add multiple users here, and really because we're just taking the value from there. So if we come back and look at this submit for level 2, all we're doing here is taking the value from that field. So if the value has multiple users in it, you can have multiple users. So this is coming from that L2 approver field over here, L2 approver field. And if you have multiple users, it will take those users and put them into the assign to field. So they'll both have access to that approval task. Now, when you create the approval task, let me pull up the other thing over here. Let's see, let's open up this one. Edit mode. So assuming I set this up correctly, when my haste to get this prepared for the webinar today, this should be working correctly. But you'll see the assigned to person is the login. So this is my JR login for our demo site. And I can see the approve and deny actions. But if I come in here as the admin account, which it should not have access to those, I won't see them. So let me see here. Yeah, okay, so they are here, but if I go to edit this, I don't have those buttons. So I can't approve it as an admin login because I don't have access to it. But if you added me as the assigned to field or the admin login as in the assigned to field, I would, and I'd be able to take action on it. So that's another thing, another step in the process. I said we weren't going to go into in too much detail, but you'll notice that this, even in the edit mode, most of these fields, and this is pretty standard Nitro form configuration, most of these fields are read-only. So we just went through and made all the fields read-only that needed to be made read-only, and we configured the permissions for the 2 buttons, which are the submit action buttons, as we just didn't have them on here. We blocked the access to them.
Okay.
When
you're ready, there's another question.
Okay. And just real quick, well, since we have a little bit of time, I'll touch on it, on the forms piece of it. So again, not strictly a forms webinar, but I just want to point out how we got these things on here. There's a actions, sorry, not the form control, but the actions. You just drag and drop a custom action, associate your approve or deny. It's actually a submit action, not a custom action. So we got to do a submit action. There is particular code that we need to put in here, and that's also in our article, in these articles over here. If we go down to Nitro Forms, you'll see that there is a where is it?
I think you just passed it. There was something up above.
Oh, maybe I passed it. It's in here somewhere where there's a certain script you need to put in there. But that's all outlined in this article so that you can just copy and paste it from what we have here. All right, so let's go ahead. What's the question?
Okay, can you show how you can do how you can, when you want a team to approve at each level and you want any team member to approve? Team, I guess, being a group, not a team in the sense of Microsoft Teams, but a group. When you want a group of people, multiple people to approve it. Otherwise, you kind of like assign it to a team, a group.
Yeah.
And then any one of those people can approve it.
Yeah, that should be fine. It's just a matter of changing permissions a little bit on those actions. So if we wanted to come in here and say, let's see, we have a members group. So I can't think of any groups we have offhand. Visitors, I don't know, they're not coming up. But yeah, if you have a group, you can enter that group in here. And again, that's going to allow you, oh, you know what, I think it's set to person only, so that's why it's not pulling up groups. So let me go to list settings.
Right, it's a setting in the actual column itself, whether
right, because it's set for people only, so we can do people in groups, and we can also do multiple selections. So we'll hit OK on that, and then Come back to our approver definition list, hit edit. I don't know, it's not coming up with any groups. I've noticed that in the last couple of days, must be a change Microsoft made recently where it's not pulling up groups for some reason. But now we should be able to add in, also be able to add in multiple users to these fields as well, which I don't know, that didn't take us either. So I don't know, something a little funky going on with Microsoft, but it should be enabled for multiple users. It should be enabled for multiple for groups as well. But again, we're just pulling that information, we're putting it onto that approval task, and then with the changes in permissions, we could just go and say, okay, we're going to get this approved button here. We're going to look at the permissions, and you can see in the show permissions, we're showing the person in column assigned to, but it's also users and groups. Or it could also say specifically there's a group that's going to be appropriate for this approval. So a couple different options there for that. But yeah, since we're simply taking that information and porting it into here, it should be able to do it with teams as easily as with individuals.
Yeah, the point is that there's amazing amount of flexibility. Program.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really the point. I mean, it's very scalable. It's like I said, scale up to as many number of approvals, the levels that you want. You can even have differentials in how many approval levels there are based on the criteria of what's being submitted. So yeah, certainly a lot of options there. Any other questions that we can dig into?
No, I think what happens is when people actually start to put together an approval process, then they will have questions on how to actually implement it. So it's a matter of mapping out the approval process beforehand to understand the different levels. We've had cases where people I remember a company had offices in US and Taiwan, and the people in Taiwan had a different approval process than the people in the US, and it depended on amount of money or what they're buying. And there's so many different variables with approval. I mean, some are very simple. You know, it goes to the manager, approve it. Others are based on the currency, the price of the thing you're ordering, or it could be on where you're located, or it could be on who you are. I mean, so many variables, and all that can be built into this approval process so that it is taken care of and does what you need it to do successfully.
Exactly. Okay, very good. Yeah, so again, I didn't go through every piece of this step by step. There's a lot in here. So these are articles we have 458, which is out on our .help site. We also have here. Let's just scroll back to the top so you can see the name of it. So two-level approval functionality using NITRO custom actions. We'll include this link to this page and a link to, or a PDF version of that Visio I was showing you of the approval workflow in the follow-up email, as well as a link to view this webinar at your convenience.
Hold on, another question, James.
Sure.
And this is an important one too, and I was thinking about it, something similar. What if the approver doesn't act within a certain period of time? And how do we either notify the user over and over, or escalate it, or go to something called a global approver or something like that to get it out of like a stuck point?
Great question. That can be done through our workflow tool. So let's see if I have it. I'm just seeing if I have it up anywhere. I don't. That's okay. I'll go back over here. I thought I had. Oh, I do have it up over here. That's right. So that can be done through the workflow tool. So the workflows I didn't talk about much, but let's go through them since we have a little bit of time here. You got this create approval task notification. This is just going to be a simple send mail item, right? So you're just sending an email. But we could easily come in here and create a new workflow. I'm sorry, it timed out a little bit. Let me refresh. Okay, that's not working. All right, let me go here. All right, so we can create a new workflow, timer-based workflow that could send those reminders. So that, well, let's jump back a step. We could on this one have it rerun. I think we can have it rerun. Let me check. No, this is just going to run when it gets created. But we have a due date. Let's say we can put a due date on that approval task, and then you create a new workflow to say if that due date is still, it's not closed, it's not been approved or denied, we can create a new workflow that's going to send out a notification based on that date time column. So, the column being due dates. Let's pull up approval tasks. Notify when approval not done. So we can do this, say, based on date time, we're going to, due date, we can send a reminder. We do it like, one day after, one day before, let's say one day before the approval is due. Then we can actually repeat that every, 2 hours. And let's say we do it for like 16 times or 8 times. And then, yeah, then there's
for now. If we're gonna
every minute for an hour, exactly.
Whatever you want to do there, yeah.
Yeah, then you just create your send mail action, which is going to be the template you want to put together for that notification. It'd just be a rehash of the original notification, which we've configured in here. It's just, reminding them that, hey, it's happened. We could also reconfigure this and edit that to be a new template. And then you just send it to the assigned to person. But yeah, so you could create that. And then the second part of the question, if you wanted to escalate it, again, we could do it based on a date time column. You also, you want to make sure you put in a condition in here that the task is not completed, right? You want the, approval decision is, you actually want it to be empty. So if the approval decision is empty, then we do this. If they made a decision, this field will be filled out. So you don't want to run this workflow at that point. But so it's in a very similar way, you could escalate it. So if that would be, instead of a send mail, you just do an update list item action, change that value of the approver task assigned to the escalated individual. So with a couple additional workflows, it very easily accommodate both of those things.
Very good. That works.
Okay, good. Yeah. Any other questions that come in, pop them in, and it's got, you can interrupt me. If you have anything that comes up afterwards, if you want to go, start configuring these, playing around with it, then, let us know if you have any questions at that point. And then the things that, just to close out here, what we want to talk about are these upcoming webinars we have. We have this month of April, a webinar series where we're going to be talking about different applications we have. Some of you already have them, but some might be new to these things. There might be a need for your organization with a new remote workforce scenario we have with the current situation. So coming up next week, we're going to be talking in depth about our help desk. Excuse me. We're going to be talking about our purchase request and contract management. Sorry about that. Onboarding and HR requests, asset management. So we have those 4 coming up every Wednesday in April, except for yesterday, I guess. Oh yeah, yesterday we did a self-service portal. So we did have one yesterday, but we have these upcoming ones. Yeah, here's the one we did yesterday, the employee self-service portal. And then coming up in the middle of April, we're going to be talking about bots. We're really investing a lot into the bot framework, into how we can integrate with Teams with those, and different things you can do to send notifications to users through Teams, and even create tickets through Teams. Things like that. We're going to be digging into, and we're really investing a lot of our dev efforts into that side of things. So we're going to be talking about what we've got, what we can provide for you in this webinar in April. And so, yeah.
That's right.
Okay, good. And Scott, anything else you want to add?
No, it's anytime people want to contact us and about anything we're doing here with Office 365 or Teams or SharePoint, we're open for that. But if specific questions about the approval processes and how they can implement it, well, we'd love to hear about that too. And hopefully this webinar, James's presentation, has been helpful to give you some idea on how to make all this work.
Yep. Very good. Okay. Well, we'll be, like I said, we'll be sending you a link to this. We'll have a couple handouts for you, and we'll be in communication. So join us on our next upcoming webinars, and hope everyone stays safe and healthy. And have a great day.
Okay, thanks, James. Goodbye.
Bye.
contact number. Okay, I'll send that to her. Hello, oh, James, you still there?
Yeah, I thought I hit the end.